flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Vice President Gates. Welcome, everybody, to tonight's Penn-Harris-Madison Board of School Trustees meeting. It's wonderful to see everybody on a night where we're going to celebrate so much excitement about the beginning of our school year. I do want to take a moment and recognize that our community had a tragedy that occurred on August the 3rd. As everybody knows, on August the 3rd, United States Congresswoman Jackie Walorski lost her life in a tragic automobile accident, as did three other people who we'd like to recognize as well. Mr. Zachary Potts, Ms. Emma Thompson, and Mrs. Edith Schmucker. Out of respect and in honor of Congresswoman Walorski and those who died in the accident, please join me in having a moment of silence. Thank you so much. Call the meeting to order. It's 7:06 p.m. First item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. Board members, any changes? Hearing none. Administration.
The administration has no changes.
Do I have a motion to approve the agenda for the Monday, August 22nd, 2022 regular board meeting as presented?
I so move.
Second.
All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed vote nay. Motion carries by a vote of 7-0. Next up is approval of the minutes. Board members, any additions or changes to the minutes from the August the 8th executive session, budget work session, and regular board meeting? Hearing none. Administration.
The administration has no changes.
Then do I have a motion to approve the minutes from the August 8th, 2022 executive session, budget work session, and regular board meeting as presented?
I so move.
A second.
All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed vote nay. That motion also carries by a vote of 7-0. Well, Dr. Thacker, welcome back to a new school year, and we'll turn it over to you for the superintendent's recognitions and announcements.
Thank you, President Riley, Board of Trustees, and everyone in attendance, everybody who is part of the PHM community watching. So welcome tonight. We have a brand new student board ambassador, and I'd like to introduce her from Penn High School for the 2022-2023 school year, Kiara von Eschenbach. Welcome, Kiara.
Good evening, Dr. Thacker, President Riley, and members of the board. We're all very excited to start the 2022 to 2023 school year, and I wanted to begin by sharing some of the amazing achievements of students and staff. Over the summer, the Penn baseball team earned the state championship by winning 3-0 against Cathedral. Penn varsity football started the season strong on Friday with a 35-6 victory over Valparaiso. Our Penn High School staff also had some athletic achievements of their own this summer, with Mr. Crooks participating in a 3,000-mile bike race across America in June, lasting 12 days. The bike race has inspired Penn's Keep Pedaling theme for this school year, which some of you may have seen in the hallway display cases around Penn put up by Kingsman Court. Today with me, I actually have the new Kingsman Court executives for the 2022 to 2023 school year, which I'd like to introduce to you all. So I'll start. I'm Kiara von Eschenbach. I'm a senior at Penn. This is my second year on Kingsman Court, and other than Kingsman Court, I'm involved in Penn Choir, DECA, Key Club, NHS, and Stock Market Club.
Hi, my name is Will Tang. This is my second year in Kingsman Court, and I'm also going to be a senior this year. Some other things that I'm involved in are Key Club, NHS, DECA, and Stock Market Club as well.
Hi everyone, my name is Azra Sirajuddin and I'll be a senior this year. This is my first year in K-Court, and other than K-Court, I'm involved in Kingsman Against Cancer, Key Club, and NHS.
Hi everyone, I'm Allison Yu. I'm also a senior and this is my first year on K-Court. And other than K-Court, I'm also involved in Key Club, NHS, Model UN, and Science Academic Super Bowl.
Hello, I'm Estelle Kizelbosch. I'm a senior and this is my first year on Kingsman Court. Besides Kingsman Court, I'm a part of Key Club, NHS, Med Club, and Teams.
Hi, my name is Sarah Mead. I'm a junior at Penn High School this year, and this is my first year on K-Court.
I'm also part of Art Club, Penn's Environmental Awareness Club, and Social Studies Academic Super Bowl. Hi everyone, my name is Ashley Mead. I'll be a junior this upcoming year. And besides Kingsman Court, I'm a part of Penn's Environmental Awareness Club, Penn's Publications Union, and English Academic Super Bowl.
Hello everyone, my name is Noah Schaefer. I'm a sophomore. This is my first year in K Court, and other than K Court, I'm part of the cross country team, track and field team, speech and debate, Key Club, and freshman mentoring.
Hi, everybody. My name is David Garassi. I'm a sophomore at Penn. This is my first year in Kingsman Court. Side of Kingsman Court, I'm a part of freshman mentoring, Key Club, Handwritten Hearts, teams, DECA, and me and some friends are trying to start up a new club called Penn Assisting Seniors.
So this year, Kingsman Court is excited to work with Mr. White and other administrators to put on our first ever homecoming parade, which will take place September 23rd. Last year, we selected our theme for the parade to be Kingdom/Medieval because the homecoming game is against Marion, which they're the Marion Knights, which correlates with Penn Kingsman. So, and thank you for listening. That's all I have for you tonight.
Thank you very much.
Are you guys doing, what are you doing for the parade? Are you doing floats? And
Yeah,
stuff
we're
like
having,
that?
so we're gonna have a float for each grade level and then one for each middle school too.
I love that you're bringing that.
We'll take a
You know,
picture
our
with-
Kingsmen are like the best night.
Don't be bashful. Go ahead.
Should we move the back one?
Yeah. Yeah. We can have one at Newmarket. Good tractor.
Yes. Good job.
Thank you.
What did you know?
Squat down.
Seymour himself.
So Principal Gallagher is going to take the picture today and send it to me.
My fancy phone.
Let me suggest maybe you come around a little bit in this corner so everybody can space out. Everybody please. Around a little bit more, Dr. Thacker. Okay.
Thank you.
Right there. Yes. 1, 2, 3. Beautiful.
Thank you. We're getting proud.
Look forward to it.
Local pride.
You're gonna get your first feature. Oh, Kiara, come on back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, ladies. Thank you. Thanks, Roy. Good to see you.
See you soon. Well, thank you, Dr. Thacker, for introducing that item. Thank you, Kiara, and for all of our new members of the Kingsman Court. We look forward to welcoming you back at subsequent school board meetings. We'll move on to our second recognition announcement item, Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley, Board of Trustees. You know, this is an exciting time of the year. Actually, it's my favorite time of the year when the beginning of the school year starts. And we have all these students coming back, 11,000 students. We have all these teachers and community members involved, and it just brings so much energy and enthusiasm to our school district. So last week, which is traditional, I had the opportunity to visit all 15 of our schools, which was quite fun and very impressive. It's amazing. Our teachers do such a great job within one day. They look like they've been here for quite some time. And I'm often joined by board members. And this year, the board members who had an opportunity to join me were Mr. Beeler, Mr. Turnwald, Mr. Riley, and we had that kind of welcome back tour, talking to lots of classes. So thank you, board members. And everybody else was with us in spirit, I know that. So tonight, we're going to kick this off with when we think of the excitement of the first week, there's hardly anything like Friday Night Lights. When you look out there, you have the football team, you have hundreds of band members, you have lots of cheerleaders, enthusiastic students showing up with the theme that they have, lots and lots of fun. Thousands of people had a great show. And so the first week on Friday, we had before the kickoff, we co-hosted the annual community tailgate with community boosters and honored the Penn alumni football team members and coaches in a pre-game event with legendary championship coach Chris Giesman. And it was a phenomenal night. We started off with a victory over Valparaiso, which is a terrific team, 35-6. And then we dedicated the Chris Giesman Kingsman Athletic Center at halftime. So let's take a look.
This is Chris Giesman expressing my appreciation for this presentation. I need to give some sincere thanks. First of all, to Dr. Jerry Thacker, his wife Donna, and the PHM Educational Foundation for this honor.
They named the athletic center after my dad, Coach Chris Giesman. Very proud, very happy. It's, I think, a fitting honor. It's something I know means a lot to my dad and to our whole family. What a special night here at TCU Freefield, honoring a legendary coach who's meant so much to so many people. So to have his name on this building certainly means so much to me as a former player. I know it means so much to the former players that were here tonight.
My name is Matt Giesman. I was quarterback of the undefeated 1995 state championship Penn Kingsman. My father is Coach Chris Giesman. Tonight was a culmination of many years in the works. It's meant the world to my father to put down roots in this community.
Coach Giesman, you got the floor, baby. Hey, congratulations. We had a little ceremony tonight for this, the name of this place, and we had over 200 ex-players come back. I talked to every one of them, and they were talking about what the football program meant to them in their life and everything. If something special happens this year, it's the players, the magic's in the players. Stay humble. This is exciting. Congratulations. Thanks, Coach Giesman.
So on behalf of all Kingsmen that played here at TCU Freefield, thank you, Chris Giesman, for everything you've done. We love you.
Okay. Penn players, lights on, one time for Coach Giesman. Here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Hey, you guys here.
Okay, that was absolutely fantastic. So much fun. Okay, now that was obviously, as we look through the week and we're going through that, but if you were to go to the schools tomorrow, here's what you would see at the very beginning in the classrooms and such.
That's how he does.
But thank you, Dr. Thacker. What a week last week was. Visiting all of our schools just never ceases to amaze me how many great things we have going on. And even still learning more about all the great things that we have going on, seeing the kids and their enthusiasm. And I do have to highly recommend the taco station at Penn High School. Plenty of jalapenos keep me satisfied. And what an amazing night, Friday night. Thank you so much, Dr. Thacker, for putting all that together. Thank you, Mr. Linsky. Thank you to all those who contributed to honoring Coach Giesman. What a great night for PHM. We'll move on to our next item, which is a beginning of the year update for Schmucker Middle School. Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley, Board of Trustees. You know, we just saw all of those students in the various schools, and so now we're going to have a focus on the middle school. And that a lot of terrific things were going on at Schmucker Middle School, and it was so much fun to tour with Mrs. Kristen Martin. And she's going to give us an overview of the first few days, as well as show some pictures how we welcome back the Spartans. Welcome, Mrs. Martin.
Thank you, President Riley, Dr. Thacker, and members of the board for allowing me to be here tonight. You know, if you give me a platform to talk about Schmucker Middle School, you might have to cut me off at the 5 minutes. So please feel free to do so, because I could talk about what we do all day, every day. So thank you for allowing me this opportunity. So I'm going to share with you this evening a few slides that I incorporated from our back to school staff meeting, as well as some pictures from our first few days. So, you know, each year we like to begin our year with a theme. And this year we really wanted something that would both ground us, but also propel us and move us forward. And so in talking with our administrative team, we said, what has the ability to do that, right? And we wanted it to be really specific to middle school. So when we think about middle school, holy cow, what formative years, right? It is such an important time. It is such a unique time. And we got to really thinking about that, and that just really kind of organically led us to, this is our time. And so our theme this year is really Spartan Pride, it's our time. And when we unpack that a little bit more and unfold that, we can dig down a little bit deeper. And so when we talk with our staff about it's our time as a staff, it's really our time to serve our students, to serve our families, to serve each other as colleagues, to serve ourselves as people, and make sure that we're filling our cups as well. And then ultimately, really, we're serving, and it's our time to serve our greater community. And so to even break that down a little bit more, yes, it is our time to collaborate and to challenge. It's also our time to laugh. And it's our time for making a difference and for working hard. It's also our time for finding joy. And really looking at the fact that it is our time to support and to have high expectations, but it's our time to love what we get to do each and every day. And so when we move forward, we have a few focuses for this year. And I think it's important to note that these focuses are really driven from our teachers and from some feedback that we had gotten last year and what was important to them. And so this year, one of our focuses is really our PLC structure. So for those of you who might not be familiar, PLC structures is professional learning communities. And at the school, it can look, different in a couple different levels. So it can be broken up by content, or it can also be broken up by grade level. For us this year, we really want to make sure that we are focusing on content. So in continuing with our theme, the PLCs that's our strength. It is our time to collaborate. As teachers, we are really one another's greatest resources, right? We can lean on each other. We can continue to challenge each other. So we need to make sure that we're providing that time for continued teaching and learning. And so our goal of PLCs is to provide the time and the support necessary for continued teaching and learning with our staff members. And so as I mentioned before, our focus this year is really going to be content specific. What does wellness content need? What do we need to do to support them? What about our language arts content goals? And really kind of diving in and looking at those things specifically. And then, of course, we discussed the logistics of it, right? We are kind of mandated by our schedule at the middle school level. And so we really got to be creative and figure out, when can we provide these opportunities to meet and discuss. and learn from one another. One of our other focuses this year is also going to be RTI, known as Response to Intervention, and some of you might know it as Multi-Tiered Systems of Support, MTSS, right? And so again, teachers were saying they wanted to be more of a part of this process. Absolutely, they are the experts. They know our students so well. So again, in continuing with our theme of It's Our Time, it is our time to support. And so our goal for our RTI process this year is to make learning a reality for every single student. We have over 1,000 students at Schmucker Middle School. And so for some, that might seem a little bit daunting, or that might seem a little overwhelming. But for us, I think it kind of ignites a fire in our bellies. And it really says, let's get intentional, let's get creative, and let's figure out how we can make that a reality. So our focuses for RTI this year are going to be on math, like language arts, and then some behavior motivations. And so again, we just spoke a little bit more about some of the logistic pieces of it. What's the RTI team look like? It's going to include our interventionists. It's going to include classroom teachers. It's going to obviously include our counselors, our youth service bureau specialist, our admin team. And then what does that communication look like, right? So how are we communicating with parents about our goals that we have for our students? How are we communicating with other teachers, those goals that we have and what we're working towards? One thing that I really loved, and I included this because, as I mentioned before, these focuses were driven by our teachers. And so when you look at John Hattie's latest visible learning research and you look at the top 3, collective teacher efficacy, student expectations, and response to intervention. If that doesn't tell you that our teachers know exactly what's going to have a high impact on student learning, I mean, I saw that and I was like, I just have to include this. Because they know what matters and they know what's important and they know what is going to give us, I guess to say, our biggest bang for our buck when it comes to our day. And I really love that quote over there. It says, collective efficacy refers to a shared belief that the school staff can have a positive impact on student achievement despite other influences. And, I think if you walk into our building and you see our staff, that is noticeable. We feel very lucky to be able to have a direct impact on students and to be able to wake up every day and to have a positive impact on their lives, no matter what they might have going on otherwise, or just the typical middle school stuff, right? As I said at the beginning, it's a very unique time for a lot of kids. So, I would really be remiss to not talk about our Phm instructional model, because tier 1 learning is really where it's at. That is probably the most important component of our student success. And so coming back to our Phm instructional model, and what I really like about this that we hit on is just the fact that it is cyclical. There is no beginning and there is no end. And it's the same thing with our RTI process. There is no beginning and there is no end. And it's the same thing with our Plc structure and our goals. There is no beginning and there is no end. We keep going and we keep working and we keep trying to improve. And so just with the Phm instructional model and making sure that every day our tier 1 teaching is driven by informed planning and differentiated delivery, and that we're talking about, and not only talking about, but putting into action our formative assessment and our individualized responses. So that being said, I know that was quick, but I just really want to thank you guys so much for giving us the opportunity. It has been a whirlwind of a couple of weeks as we've welcomed all of our students into our building, and it has been such an honor. So at that, do you guys have any questions for me or anything about Schmucker Middle School?
Board members, any questions or comments from Mrs. Martin?
Well, you just reminded me that I have a very serious case at Schmucker Middle School withdrawal. The first time in 8 years that one of my children has not been at Schmucker Middle School. It is an extraordinary learning community, and that's no accident because we've had extraordinary school leaders and incredibly hardworking expert teachers there. I will tell you a story I heard from one of your teachers last year while walking through the building with you, Dr. Thacker. She pulled me aside, and she had spent the majority of her career in a private school. And she said, when I got to Schmucker Middle School, I really thought I wouldn't find the same sense of community. There maybe be a little less care, and I wasn't sure about the quality of the teaching. And she said to me, I have never been a part of a school with a stronger school culture, with more like abundant care, and some of the best teachers I've ever seen. That's certainly been my experience as a parent. Doesn't happen by accident, Mrs. Martin, you know that. Hats off to you all, and please thank all of your staff for the work and the commitment that it takes to make something like Schmucker such a thriving community.
I will happily take that message back to them.
I'll be there next year, and when I need a pick-me-up, I might show up.
Yes, I will say we had a new teacher, and it was the first couple days, and this was the first year that we had 6th, 7th, and 8th graders all using lockers, right? Because we hadn't used lockers in the last couple of years because of COVID, and we had a different meeting about some teaching and learning interventionists, and she was like, it really was just all hands on deck. And I said, it was. It's exactly what we're about, right? All hands on deck.
Well, Mrs. Martin, I know you've been with us only a brief time in your role as the principal at Schmucker, but in a brief time, you have managed to design great instructional models. I love it. It's our time to build, laugh, explore, collaborate, enjoy. What a great message for our educators. A great message for our students. Thank you.
Thank you
for everything
very
you're
much.
doing. We come back and see us again soon.
I'll be back in a few minutes, I think, later today in the board meeting.
Yes, Susan.
You guys are going to be sick of me after today. So thank you very much, you guys.
We'll move on to our consent agenda. Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley and Board of Trustees. The administration recommends approval of the 5 items appearing on the consent agenda. Also to note, appearing on the personnel report on our certified staff tonight is 1 retirement. Vicki Roush, account coordinator, deputy treasurer at ESC, is retiring on September 28th this year, following 15 years of service. On behalf of the board and administration, we wish Vicki the very best in her upcoming retirement.
Board members, any questions or comments for the administration? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the August 22nd, 2022 consent agenda as presented by Dr. Thacker?
I so move.
Second.
All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Any vote opposed, vote nay. Motion carries by a vote of 7-0. And Mrs. Roush, we obviously do thank you so much for everything you've done for Penn-Harris-Madison, and we wish you Godspeed in your retirement and all the things that you do. We'll move on to our next item, which is the instructional report item. Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley and Board of Trustees. Our Assistant Superintendent, Dr. Heather Short, will introduce the next item for us this evening, which is the presentation on interventionist training that took place this summer. Dr. Short.
Thank you, Dr. Thacker, President Riley, and members of the board. It is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Lavon Dino, who is the Director of Professional Development and Student Learning. Mrs. Lorraine White, who is the principal at North Point Elementary School, and a quick welcome back to Mrs. Kristen Martin, who is our principal at Schmucker Middle School. These 3 women were intricately involved in planning and helping to facilitate the interventionist training that we held this summer. So you will hear a little bit about how those plans went, as well as what the action plans will be for each of the buildings as the principals and interventionists take that back and then utilize their formative data to create those. So Dr. Lavon Dino, welcome.
Well, good evening, President Riley, Dr. Thacker, and members of the board. I am always excited to come and talk about instruction with you. So we're going to share tonight about our interventionist training that we had corporation-wide. And I do want to give a thank you first to Mrs. White and Mrs. Martin, who will be joining us tonight. But I also want to mention that Mrs. Hirschkopf and Mrs. Russell and Mrs. Campbell were also principals that joined in to create this day of training for our interventionists. So I thought I would start with this because it was very timely. When we were in the process of planning this training day, this article came out in Ed Week, and it was essentially talking about all the different approaches that schools had taken to fill in maybe learning gaps and things that we've been talking about. And they did a special on high dosage tutoring and how that's one of the most research tested strategies for raising student achievement. And I thought that sounded really good because that's exactly what we were doing. And they also talked about how to implement it correctly and in an efficient way that was helpful for students. And that was also exactly what we were doing. So it was nice to get that affirmation before we jump back into our training for this year. So for a quick reminder, overall, we have 20 interventionists. They do service all schools, so from the elementary level all the way to the high school. This year, we were able to add additional interventionists from Meadows Edge, Walt Disney, and Grissom. So on August 5th, we got together for the day. It was all the interventionists and their principals, and we're able to collaborate and plan for the upcoming year. So it was very exciting, and we'll discuss kind of what that looked like, but it was nice to have interventionists who returned and then our new interventionists. So we spent time reflecting, collaborating on what we've done previously, thinking about how we want to move forward, and also training our new interventionists as well too. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Mrs. White to talk about some of the tutoring part.
So continuing on, we presented our new interventionists with this book called How Tutoring Works. 6 steps to grow motivation and accelerate student learning. And like Dr. Dean Null said, that's what exactly we want to do. We want to fill in those gaps and we want to accelerate learning. And this is a great resource for that. So the authors are 3 experts in the field of literacy, 2 of whom presented at our literacy summit last year. So Nancy Fry, Doug Fisher, maybe those names sound familiar to you, are 2 of the authors of this book. The experts have used research-based educational practices that our interventionists could easily just take and apply right away. The title, How Tutoring Works, 6 Steps to Growing Motivation and Accelerating Student Learning, is our goal. And so listed on the slide, you see 6 components. And so what we did at the training is we went through all of those 6 components in a little bit more depth. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to briefly summarize what those components consist of. So, chapter 1, the first step to motivating learning and accelerating student growth is that we have to build relationships with our students. I don't think we need experts to tell us that. We all know that we have to develop relationships with students. That's step 1. And I think that is what our interventionists are doing right now as school starts, is making sure those bonds are strong and developing those relationships. I like the quote in the chapter that said, emotion and motivation are the fire under cognition. So without that emotion and motivation, there's not going to be much cognitive learning going on. Chapter 2 addresses confidence and challenges to learning. So those students that are meeting with these interventionists have some of the most learning challenges of the students. So it addresses how to help these students with their confidence. It talks about growth mindset. It talks about just finding those strengths of students, teaching our interventionists what to say when students are not believing in themselves, that these interventionists can use right away. So it's so applicable immediately. Chapter 3 talks about the importance of goal setting. And having high expectations, even for those students who have learning challenges. So we have to set those high expectations. It talks about how students need to find relevance in what they're learning. And it talks about how tutors have to have clarity in their objectives and expectations. Chapter 4 helps our tutors and interventionists teach our students how to learn. So those students who struggle with learning don't know how to learn. So they're used to maybe being fed information and then spitting it out. So it teaches them that learning is internal. They need to learn some metacognitive skills, learn to self-reflect and set personal goals and be proud of those goals. Chapter 5 is my favorite chapter because it's learning content. What teacher doesn't like to learn more strategies on all the different subject areas? And that's what it is. It's teaching these interventionists best teaching practices for teaching writing, reading, and mathematics. So that's my favorite chapter. Chapter 6 is just, as it says, deliberately practicing skills. So there's a difference between repetitive practice and deliberate practice. When you're deliberately practicing, you're setting a goal for what you want to achieve instead of just repetitively doing something that they already know how to do. And we know that the interventionists do not have a lot of time, so it's important to make sure that these students are practicing deliberately. So we went through the chapters, and the Learning Division got everybody a book. And then after that, we had some reflection time, always looking inward to move forward. Last year, we asked our interventionists what they thought were the best characteristics of effective interventionists, and that list is what they gave: motivator, coach, data analyst, or data nerd. That's one of my favorites, warm demander. So we asked everyone to look at those characteristics and then just pick 4 that they thought were the most important after 1 year of being in that role of interventionists. And then choose 2 of the ones they thought that were their strengths, and then choose 1 characteristic that they thought that they could work on. So that's how they were able to fine-tune, set goals, and reflect before moving forward with year 2.
Thank you.
And so after our interventionists and groups had some time to really reflect personally, we also wanted to make sure that we had time to reflect as whole school communities. And so we kind of broke off into our groups of schools. Some of the schools did pair up. And we really wanted to look at these 5 kind of components that we thought were necessary for successful intervention groups and an intervention protocol. So we had teachers and interventionists and administrators look at data collection and student grouping. What data are we utilizing to determine what groups, who's in what group and who might be pulled for an intervention? How are we grouping students? Is it by grade? Is it by need? Is it by skill? And really talking about those and unfolding that. We talked about the schedule, which looks different, obviously, as you can imagine, at the elementary level and the middle school level. And where are we pulling kids for that? Because we want to make sure that we're not hindering their other academic time for these really important and highly successful interventions. We also wanted to kind of know and kind of unpack, how are we celebrating students? What does that look like at each school? And how are we making sure that we're helping share their successes? One of my favorites was from last year, our math interventionist. He got these little Emmy awards, like fake little Emmy award trophies. And at the end of the year, during lunch, we pulled all of our kids and he had created these awards. And it was really great because it was like most improved in number sense, most improved for fluency, most improved for overall, and we had a lot of these different, and kids were hooting and hollering and cheering each other on, and just over this little plastic kind of Emmy award. But it was really cool to see the kids celebrating each other as well, and not just an adult celebrating that student. But we really wanted to share what that looks like and make sure that we're incorporating those things throughout the year. And then we really dove into what the interventions themselves look like. And we're very, very thankful that we have a learning division that supports providing the necessary resources, because without that, it would be very difficult. So we looked at some of our resources and our interventions. I know at the elementary level, things like Foundations and Hegarty and Geodes. We looked at corrective reading and focused math at the middle school, and really talked about how are those helping us align to our goals and kind of helping us meet our success criteria. And then we also talked a little bit about communication. And so that is communication with, obviously, internally, like how are we communicating out with teachers, who's going in what group and when, and what are their specific goals and what are we working towards, but then also how are we communicating with parents? How are we really sharing and helping our parents visualize and see how students are growing or where they're at in the learning process? So it was really neat to kind of just hear how different schools had adapted and kind of met the specific needs of their schools as we did that. And then as schools were sharing out, after they really took some time to reflect on those, every single person in the room had a document that had water, weed, or plant. And so like at the end of mine, it was just full, right? And so as other schools were talking, people, interventionists, admin, everybody that was there, we thought about, okay, what do we want to continue to do that worked really well, right? Year 2 going in, what do we want to water? What worked well? And what do we want to continue? What are some things that we need to weed? Because that's necessary sometimes too. So what do we want to stop doing that doesn't work? Or what, from learning from others, can we start doing that's going to work better? And then what do we want to plant? So then what do we want to do differently this year? What are maybe some new components that we want to include, or some different paths that we want to go down? So that really just gave all of our interventionists and admin an opportunity to really hear from everybody else and be very intentional about how we're moving forward.
All right, so once we figured out what we were going to plant, that led us directly to our action plan. So each school created an action plan, and under those 5 categories that we discussed, they created a goal and a strategy and came up with a measure. So that was great to see principals and interventionists interacting and collaborating to create these goals for the year. Then as they were creating those goals, we did spend some time. I got the privilege to meet with our new interventionists to talk through some of the new curriculum to them, to go over some of that. So Mrs. Martin mentioned those, but continuing on with those interventions that we picked, because they seem to be very successful from last year. And then a big part of that action plan was data. So looking at what assessments we're using. So we use the assessments that are embedded in the curriculum. For example, if we're looking at corrective reading or focus math, using those assessments. But then we also look at Ames Web for math. That was great. We had Mike Mattis and Emily Breeden, who came and did an hour presentation on data reports and things for our interventionists to use. And then of of course, ClearSight that we use across the corporation to use that data and look at where our students are growing. So I thought I would pull, this is just a quick little snapshot of the data points that we use, right? We have many interventions. We talk about strong tier 1 interventions. We talk about the actual time that people have, students have with interventions. And one of the big points of data that we pull every year is to look at when students take ClearSight, the winter interim. So that covers grade level standards. They take that in January. We look at the students who are below proficient or not passing, and then we compare that to what happens in the late spring when they take iLearn. And this is just a little snapshot of multiple different schools where we're looking at students who met or grew. So in the winter, they were below proficient, and then in the spring when they took iLearn, they were at proficient or even above. So again, we can't always delineate exactly what's coming from strong tier 1 intervention or strong tier 1 instruction or different interventions, but we know across the board what we are doing is working, and it's working really well. So I think that's a very important point with interventions that we talk interventionists, that we talk about what data we're using to track students' growth. So I thought we would end with some victories. This was one that we shared. All interventionists who worked last year talked about student victories. So I loved this quote from a middle school one. She said, a 7th grade girl found out that she had passed math iLearn after she had been in a small group, an intervention group. And she said she was so excited, then asked if the interventionist could help her pass language arts. So I think that was great too, where kids are asking to be part of this and know that it's really working for them. And then last but not least, hearing from our teachers, from our interventionists were there, just ideas and thoughts they had after the training, just really enjoying that time to collaborate, sharing ideas from other schools. I really wish you were there. The energy in the room was great. Talking about, looking back last year when it was all new for everyone and talking about how we thought this would play out. And then this year to really celebrating those victories and looking forward to how we want to fine tune and plant some of those new ideas for this year. So thank you for listening to our interventionist training session. I'd be glad to answer any questions, so I know Mrs. White or Mrs. Martin would as well.
Board members, any questions or comments? Mr. Turnwald?
Just a question for the overall training, were the Title I teacher, like the Title I reading coordinator, if it was a Title I building, also included in those trainings?
Yeah, so they could if they wanted to, but most of this was just for interventionists. But I will tell you with part of the action plan that principals include those people in the action plan too. Like when we talk about small groups and scheduling and all of those things. So, yeah.
And then last year we had roughly 17 interventionalists. Do you know, or do we have information on how many of those are returning? I know we added 3 new positions, but I was interested in how many we retained.
Yes. So I believe we had 7, and this is from memory, so I'm going to say pretty close. Okay, yeah. Then we had, I believe, 7 from elementary returning. We had 1 from high school that returned, 2 from middle school that returned, and then we had the new ones. So I believe we might have had, I think it was around 10 that were new, but that's also including the, what would it be, 6 new positions that we had? Is that right? Or 5 new positions? So yeah, we had quite a few returning and then quite a few new ones as well with the additional positions we were able to add at Meadows and Walt Disney and Grissom.
So about 24, 25 altogether?
We have 20 altogether.
Did they all attend?
Yeah, I believe everyone was there except for one person was in Alaska, I believe, from memory. So we didn't hold her to it.
And help me understand why Meadows Edge, Disney, and Grissom. Was that data driven? Was it a title opportunity that unfolded? What's your thinking in that?
I think it was truly based on what we saw. We felt we needed additional support in some schools. And so we were happy to be able to provide additional interventionists to do that.
Oh, just a point of clarification. In the first presentation, Ms. Martin talked about RTI, and then this one's mostly the interventionist. So there's a difference between the two. And I know, well, we probably all know what they're, but maybe people in the audience, if you could just clarify the difference between RTI intervention and then the interventionists here in the public school, or that are helping the kids with remediation.
Okay, sure. So the interventionist would then support academically what needs come out of RTI. So if there's a student that we're worried about academically, you would discuss that during an RTI meeting and decide what kind of interventionist would be best for them. So
the RTI then put them into the interventionist program.
Okay. Yes, that would be one way to do that. Absolutely. Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Well, thank you so much. This was a wonderful presentation. And Actually, there are lots of thanks to spread around. Dr. Short, thank you so much for your continued leadership with the Learning Division. Thank you, Mrs. Dean Knoll, Dr. Dean Knoll, Mrs. Martin, and Mrs. White, so much for all the work that you've expended putting this together, putting on the training for interventionists. Thank you so much. It's obviously producing great results. We appreciate you. See you soon. We'll move on to our next item, which is business action item. Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley and Board of Trustees. Okay, this is the second reading and adoption of addenda to the 2022-2023 student handbooks pertaining to request name changes relative to changing said student's gender from that which is listed on the birth certificate. Mr. Jeff Johnson, attorney with May Oberfeld Lorber, will lead this action item for us tonight. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Dr. Thacker, President Riley, and members of the board. As Dr. Thacker indicated, tonight is the second reading for revisions to the elementary, middle school, and high school handbooks for those situations where a student desires to change their name to a gender that is different than is depicted on their birth certificate. It was read at the last meeting, and I haven't received, our office hasn't received any questions or comments, but we'd certainly be happy to entertain any questions or comments if you would have any.
Board members, any questions or comments from Mr. Johnson? Okay. Hearing none, before we take a vote on the proposed change, we do have a number of individuals who've signed up to address this item of our agenda. And so let me call on them. Here's what we'll do. I'm going to read a few guidelines for our visitors, and then I will call on everybody who has pre-registered to come up and speak to the board. Anyone wishing to address the board on this topic is invited to do so under this item. A time limit of 3 minutes shall be enforced for persons wishing to speak during this item of the agenda. It is requested that names and addresses be stated at the beginning of such comments. Individuals may speak only once during this section. Personnel issues are absolutely not to be addressed during open sessions of the board. Concerns about individual employees of the district should be brought to the superintendent or his designee. The board does not respond to questions or comments. And I will note, just out of courtesy for everybody who is preparing to address the board, we do have a number of people who have signed up to address the board, not just on this topic, but on other topics as well. So please stick to your 3 minutes out of respect for everybody else so that we can make sure that we get everybody in. Okay, so with that in mind, the first person that I have registered to speak on this item of the agenda is H.R. Jung. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. My name is H.R. Jung. My address is 1313 Elliott Street, South Bend, Indiana. I'm the executive director of the LGBTQ Center here in the Michiana area. I'm also a former educator. I used to teach band and orchestra at Cathedral High School. I was really enjoying the band out there. Don't miss it, but I do miss the kids. But I did want to talk tonight about this particular topic. And I want to share some statistics with you from the Trevor Project, which is an organization, national organization, that seeks to reduce and eliminate suicidal ideation among LGBTQ youth. LGBTQ youth represent about 40% of all attempted and completed suicides here in the United States annually. Obviously, LGBTQ do not represent 40% of the population of youth. So they ask the question, why is that? So they do biannual surveying, and some of the answers that they've come up with is either non-acceptance of parents and families, or non-acceptance from schools and teachers, non-acceptance from religious organizations or society in general. Some of the things that they have found through this surveying is that having at least one adult in their life that is accepting and affirming of who they are can reduce that risk of suicidality by at least 20 to 30%. Obviously, if it's a parent, that goes down much further. But a lot of those teens seek out teachers, other staff members at school for that affirmation. And this particular policy change could create barriers to that, could create a chilling effect of those students seeking out that help, seeking out that recognition, seeking out a trusted adult that they can turn to. And that just increases that poor health, mental health outcomes that I'm sure all of you are keenly aware of. That is a problem among high school students and middle school students these days. And we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to help those kids. And I really feel like this policy doesn't help that. The other thing is, my name's HR. I don't go by Herman, which is on my birth certificate. So my question for you all that you don't have to answer is, does this apply if I were a student here and my parents would have to come and sign something or request that I be called HR all the time? If I have a coach or another teacher who uses a nickname for me, would they have to sign off on that as well? I think this just creates a huge potential legal issue for you as well, because if this isn't carried across for every Mike, Bobby, Susie, Alex, Zach, Lily, that this could be a potential problem, because if you're not holding everybody accountable to this, then you are targeting specifically LGBTQ and trans students, and that could be potentially a big problem. So I just urge you not to pass this. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir, very much. We appreciate your time. Mrs. Brzezinski?
Hello, Laura Zinski. I actually live in the Penn District. My kids go here. I'm disappointed. Nobody asked any questions. What does this mean for the students in the classroom? What does this mean for the teachers? Student has different beliefs than the other students. Does it mean they need to be mean? Does it mean they need to be nasty? But you can't compel a student to know and call somebody by a different gender when they are not, and that student knows they are not. And I'm disappointed that nobody has asked that. You're going to leave it to the teachers in the classroom. You're going to put this on instead of before, where the parent, when was concerned, would call the teacher and you guys would deal with it, and it was handled before. But now, anybody's kids who are uncomfortable in the classroom, not just kids who identify differently, what's going to happen to them if they refuse? Are you going to say that's hate speech for the kids? Are you going to be explaining this to kindergartners, why one kid one day identified as a boy and now they're a girl? Maybe they'll switch back. Maybe they won't. Is the teacher going to be explaining that to a child who doesn't understand? I mean, I don't know if you know, but a lot of kids, kindergarten, will pick their nose and eat it. They just do not understand how to process certain things you tell them, and it's not a teacher's place. And I think you're putting a huge burden on teachers. Now, if we move up into the grades and the kids can understand it, families still, we have values and beliefs that are different than other people's. Will you violate those values and beliefs of those families and those kids by insisting and compelling their speech that they refer to another student by certain pronouns, because that's what you've putting in place? I can't believe you're doing this without going through that and understanding that. You're going to leave teachers having to deal with arguments in the classroom. And I don't think that's fair to them. And I'm pretty disappointed that this is my third go around talking and nobody had any questions for the lawyer. So I guess my question is to you, can they compel speech, Mr. Johnson? Can they compel speech from a student to refer to another student by different pronouns? Because nobody else will answer it.
No, you can't
No.
compel a student to say
Okay.
anything.
Can they say that they're harassing?
It's clear that you're still in your 3 minutes. So
I
if
know
you
I
choose
am.
to ask him questions, it's still in your 3 minutes. I'll
I'm
give you
aware of
10
that,
extra
Mr.
seconds.
Riley. I'm not looking to get arrested tonight. So I was just curious. I mean, can they be put down for bullying? Will you report them to the state that my kids are bullying? Can they be sought for all this stuff? I mean, nobody's asked you any questions. I mean, I've obviously asked the questions at least twice. So I have asked.
It's going to be very fact specific and very fact sensitive. You can't give just a general response to that question. It's all about context.
One kid will say, I'm sorry, I don't participate in doing pronouns. I'm not going to call you by that. And all of a sudden that student gets reported anonymously to the school safe helpline that they've been bullied.
Your 3 minutes have expired.
It's gonna happen.
Mr. Rutten.
Hi, Andy Rutten. I live at 55304 Cedar Trail. I wanted to share that on my birth certificate, my name is Anthony. One of my parents liked the nickname Andy, and it's stuck ever since. When I started kindergarten, I went by Andy. I use it to this day. I know there's another lady in the building somewhere. Her name is also Andy. That's okay. Name changes are fine. Nicknames are okay. I think that they need to be thoughtful and reasonable. So when the parents are involved with that is encouraging. Pronoun changes are not reasonable. Okay. It gets into a slippery slope of politics that is hard to deal with. People seem to view this differently, but kids don't really understand yet what gender is. It's typical for kids to to play an imaginative play and pretend they are another gender. They will put on another gender's clothes, and it's fun. It's a game. But they do that as a kid, and then they stop as they grow up. But now, a trusted institution like a school that has trusted teachers encouraging kids, don't stop pretending, keep doing that. As a young kid, you may actually be a different gender. That doesn't really make sense. So I think name changes, recognizing bona fide nicknames, it's a great idea, but I don't feel that Penn should be getting involved with pronoun politics. Thanks for listening.
Mr. Rutten. Anastasia Glassburn.
Good evening, Dr. Thacker, Board of Trustees, and President Riley. As a parent, here is my legitimate concern. This section in the handbook for all grade levels is opening the door for this ideology to be brought into the classroom, because anytime you create policies or procedures like this, you're inviting it into the district and therefore into the classroom. Did any of you stop to think why we even need to include this? Because even just 3 years ago, we didn't have this sudden trend in children subscribing to this ideology that is gender fluid, that gender is how you feel, non-binary, can be changed. So how did it get here? Adults. Adults taught them that these concepts could exist. They targeted youth and gave them the vocabulary for a very specific reason. So rather than PHM dismissing this ideological trend, you doubled down. You encourage students to change their gender, their name, their pronouns, as long as they have parental consent. Parental consent is not the issue. The fact that this exists at all is the issue. After spending a considerable amount of time researching the IDOE requirements, there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that states school must include a policy or procedure regarding pronoun usage. Therefore, it must be said tonight that our administration, our school board, and members of the handbook committee are making a conscious choice to invite this ideology into PHM and into the classrooms at all grade levels. Furthermore, Right on Skyward parents are to sign stating, quote, "We have received and read the handbook. We understand the rights and responsibilities pertaining to students and agreed to support and abide by the rules, guidelines, procedures, and policies of the PHM School Corporation." You asked parents to sign this before you even voted on what this section will say. Parents, if you're listening tonight and you do not agree with this ideology, do not sign the handbook this year. Why should parents and teachers be fighting to have this removed? This ideology is rooted in critical theory, more specific queer and gender theory. All critical theories are rooted in Marxism. These theories are targeting the vulnerable youth. You now have activist teachers at PHM right now with signs up in classrooms advertising they are safe and inclusive with rainbow flags and trans pride backgrounds, as if to say without these advertisements, these classes were not already safe and welcoming. And what message does this send for the teachers who choose not to put up these signs, who choose to remain neutral as they should? Are they to be trusted? We are at a point when the governing body of PHM will either succumb to the destruction of public education or rise above it and dare to say no. Your vote on this second reading will tell all of your stakeholders whom you represent exactly where each of you stand on allowing this ideology into our district and into our classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Glassburn. Next up is Megan Buell.
Thank you, Dr. Thacker, Mr. Riley, and the board for allowing me to speak tonight. I just want to address doing your due diligence in writing this proposed change to the handbook, making sure that we are staying within parameters of pronouns, which are not a legally binding representation. It's really a social construct for communication comfortableness. Birth certificates do not have pronouns on them, and very few forms include pronouns. So making sure that including pronouns in your language is going beyond any legal control or support for your policy. The second point I'd like to make is birth certificate is a Department of Health document, and leaning on that to make school policy does not fall in line with other legal precedents that have been set in the state. So I caution you to make sure that you're not infringing on any HIPAA violations by disclosing a health document information to the public or within the classrooms. And lastly, as an out and proud transgender person who was struggling to know myself in elementary school, middle school, and high school, that distraction carried a big weight upon me, and I was a distracted student, and I was not focused because I was more worried about that. The mental health impacts on forcing somebody to, or telling somebody how they have to identify rather than letting them identify to be comfortable within their own skins and being authentic, is going to have a negative impact on their educational experience. Due diligence, make sure that you have checked all the boxes because this could open a can of worms that you may have more problems with than you realize. Thank you for the time.
Thank you for your time. We appreciate your remarks. We'll move to Samuel David Lund.
Samuel David Lund, 30089 Fox Run Trail, Granger, Indiana. I'm just going to start out simple for you guys. And there's this thing called the Parents of Pupils Protection Act. If I said that, let me get my notes back up. Sorry about that. Protection of Pupil Rights Amendment. Okay. And in that, sexual anything has no place in any government-funded school. You might want to read up on it, okay? And I can promise you, real quick, if my daughter comes home and has any of this, any of it, she's asking me what her gender is or any of that crap brought to her, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to call the local sheriff. And whatever teacher involved in the school board or in the school district is going to get arrested for inappropriate behavior with a minor. Okay, flat out. That's what I will do. I can promise you that. Okay. After that, you might want to look into US Code 20 US Code 123H. Okay. These are the legal rights of our students and our parents in this district. Okay. And you should make yourself very aware of them before you vote on what you're doing, because you're going to put yourself in a bad situation. Okay. On the legal side of things. Okay. Now, how somebody feels, I get it. Okay. People want to identify, they can identify. But that doesn't mean that my child has to be forced with identifications or have those pushed upon her in any way, shape, or form. Okay. And those people that have those, they want to identify one way or another. Hey, let's get them the help they need so that they can feel comfortable in their skin. Okay. But let's not try to change other children from what their parents have taught them, what their parents have instilled in them. I mean, is it your job to teach my child sexuality? Is it? Would you feel comfortable talking to a 6-year-old about sexuality? That's all I got to say about that. Come on.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you coming and expressing your concerns with us. Krista Cox.
Thank you. My name is Krista Cox. I live at 52671 Santa Monica Drive in Granger. I do have a student at Penn High School. I'd like to first note that despite some of the concerns about former parents, the way I understand it, the policy handbook already allows for a student to request changes to name or pronouns. The change, as I understand it, the amendment, the addendum, requires parental consent and involvement. I may misunderstand the policy, but that's the concerns that I'm talking about tonight. If that is in fact the case, it would seem that a lot of the concerns that have been raised by some previous speakers, if they were really a concern, already would be happening. So first, I'd like to start by saying a shocking 35% of trans youth attempt suicide. They're twice as likely as other kids to experience depression. Fewer than 1 in 3 trans and non-binary kids feel supported in their identity at home. Because of the prevalence of the rejection of kids by their own parents for being trans, LGBTQ kids make up a disproportionate share of homeless youth and kids in foster care. This discussion is important because the stakes are really high. This school board's non-discrimination policy acknowledges that discrimination and harassment are devastating to academics, relationships, and self-worth. It indicates this district will not discriminate on the basis of gender status, orientation, or identity. As a PHM mom, I know this district values student well-being and positive self-worth. My trans kid came out to me in 3rd grade. So far, PHM has always been supportive and helpful in using their correct pronouns and their correct name, and they've always helped my kid feel safer and more accepted. This policy to require parental consent will not affect my kid. If the policy changes, I'll just call and ask the administration to change their name and pronouns in the system. This policy will only affect students who do not feel safe coming out to their parents. And the ultimate impact won't be parents learning that their kids are trans. I understand as a parent, we all want more information about our kids, but no student who feels unsafe coming out to their parents now is going to change their mind because of this policy and do it. The only impact is going to force already at-risk kids to not only feel unsafe at home in their true skin, their identity, their truth, but also at school, all day, every day. Using a student's accurate pronouns is a simple, small act, but it has a profoundly positive impact. With this small gesture, schools affirm their students, help them feel safe and accepted, and promote more positive interactions among students with different identities. I hope this board will continue its student-led pronoun policy, adhere to its non-discrimination clause, and choose to prioritize the safety and well-being of its most vulnerable students. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Appreciate your remarks. Aaron?
Hi, my name is Aaron Cox. I am a student at Penn High School, and I have chosen not to disclose my address since I am a minor. I am also the president of Penn's Gay Straight Alliance, and I am part of the Indiana Department of Health's Youth Advisory Board. I have been out as trans for over half of my life now, and it is a very large and important part of my identity. I know what it feels like to be misgendered, and I know what it feels like to have that be a constant ongoing thing. It hurts. It makes me feel completely invalid and invisible, and all of the efforts that I put into making my appearance reflect my true self seem to be in vain. It makes me feel hopeless. Even with a supportive and loving family, I have harmed myself because of the way trans people are treated and perceived in society. I know this policy won't affect me as much as it will my friends and peers who aren't out to their parents. I know kids who are not out to their parents because they would either be abused or abandoned, and they don't want to find out which one. The best case scenario is that my friends are misgendered for 7 hours straight for 5 days a week. The worst case scenario is that they are forcibly outed to their parents and placed into a dangerous situation. This makes me fear for the well-being and even safety of my friends who are already in bad situations where they cannot be themselves at home. Please reject this change for the safety of trans kids. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Aaron, thank you. And I just want to tell you, how much we appreciate hearing from our students. We don't often get enough of the student perspective, and thank you for coming and sharing your experiences and your perspective with us. It's much appreciated. Come back, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Riley.
Board members, based on public feedback, any additional questions or comments for the administration?
I got a question. Just a clarification. On this reading of the update, is there any kind of restriction on teachers initiating the contact about changing the name or the pronouns with the students? Is this something that teachers generally should not be doing? I mean, if a student wants to have his pronoun changed and the parent wants it, and they're the ones who initiate that change, that is not done by like passing out questionnaires or passing out information from teachers telling the students they can do this or that or whatever, or is that something that's still involved with this policy?
This policy doesn't address that situation. This policy addresses a situation where a student wants to change their name different from the gender that's on their birth certificate. And this, what this policy is meant to do, it sets forth the process for that situation.
Right, I understand.
It doesn't address teachers at all.
Okay, I guess do we have a policy then on whether or not teachers can initiate this process by passing out questionnaires or passing out information about all of this information?
I don't know the policy number, but back in December, January, I believe we passed the policy that this would fall under survey, questionnaires on gender.
So that's not something that allowed at Penn?
Correct.
Good.
I'd like a little bit of clarification on a couple things, Mr. Johnson. Did we, just to get the record straight, we did pass a policy several board meetings ago for this current handbook,
Yes,
correct?
that's correct.
Do we have parents, Dr. Thacker, that have essentially signed the handbook of the policy that we passed?
We would have parents who have signed handbooks, yes, and this is an addendum.
Right.
Okay. I think that's problematic. I just think that is inherently problematic. We will have parents signing two different versions of the handbook. Mr. Johnson, I have a couple of questions. So the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, says that a parent has the right to amend student records, name, gender, etc. So that is federal law that a parent can come to the administration and change the name on a student record or the gender associated with the student record. That's correct. Okay. We also have a policy that says that we don't discriminate based on race, color, national origin, sex, including gender status, sexual orientation, and gender identity. My concern right now, after a member of the community brought it up, is that we now have a policy that basically addresses name changes only as they relate to changing said student's gender. We now have a conflict with our non-discrimination policy, meaning to the point I can't, changing a name for other reasons. I would like to study this policy much more carefully than the one that is now proposed. I think there are several problems with it that I think we need to look very carefully at. And I recommend that this be considered for the next handbook cycle, as opposed to the handbook cycle that we're in the middle of right now. We did pass the original wording, right?
We did.
Unanimously passed?
Yes.
Okay.
So.
Is it
So
possible to strike this from the handbook?
Can we roll the handbook back to last year's?
I've got an idea. I have an idea. I too have been persuaded by some of our public feedback, Aaron in particular, and I also am persuaded by Mr. Jung. I think that the suicidal implications are very, very serious and do require some additional thought. Procedurally, here's where we're at. We adopted a policy that I believe, and I believe in the opinion of a majority of the school board members, already addressed the situation and gave parents the authority, the exclusive authority, to make gender-related pronoun changes. At the request of the public, we took it upon ourselves to clarify, to make it absolutely certain that there's no question in the language, and that is the policy that is before us now. We have already adopted the policy that was approved, I believe, June the 24th. I could be mistaken about the date. But that right now is the policy, the handbook policy that is the prevailing policy. I move that we table the administration's recommendation to further amend the student handbook and reconvene the issue for the academic school year beginning 2023, 2024 next summer. Is there a second?
I second.
All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed vote nay. That motion carries by a vote of 7-0 and the item is tabled.
I would like Mr. Johnson to review. I heard that we could be subject to some legal actions and things. I want to be sure if we would proceed that we would be assured that we wouldn't be subject to any legal actions.
I will do that. But I would just caution you that no matter what we do, we will be subject to legal action. If you just listen to what was said here tonight, you've got people diametrically opposed and they can find an attorney. And I know what you're saying, that we put ourselves in the best legal position to be in, but I don't want anyone to think that we wouldn't be subject to legal proceedings.
I do, sorry, go ahead. I do think there's some emergent case law. There's a case out of Ohio as it relates to teachers, whether the teacher has to call the student by the name on the student record. And I believe there's a recent case in Maryland in the K-12 setting, as it relates to a policy like this. I would just add, I am not an English teacher, but I just want to add that pronouns are always optional. You can always call a student by his or her name. So, and pronouns are not on.
The revision removed any reference to pronouns.
No, it's in there.
It talks about the names.
No, it says different name / pronoun, right?
That's the existing policy.
Okay. All right. So okay. Thank you.
Well, and that's my concern. The current policy we signed up now with some of the public input, I think we're open
So this is where I'm still unsure of tonight.
to some issues on the other side.
Because the policy was approved in this section that did change some language compared to the last school year. That was approved and is sitting in there.
And parents have already signed assent to that.
What I'm asking or trying to understand is, could you roll this section, whichever, I can't remember the exact citing of this section. Yeah, but it doesn't have the page number.
Citation.
Yeah, so it's
under student enrollment.
Yeah. Where you could
Which
roll
is a
that
different
section back to the
Right.
previous school year,
I would support that.
so that then we're in the same spot that we were last school year, that we can better evaluate what to do in this section in the next school year. Or that way, there's no issue for anyone related to that section.
Well, we'd have to reverse our unanimous vote from June.
We get back into the two
And
versions of.
hang on.
handbook. It wasn't in the
Wait. Please don't heckle the school board. We are having a table discussion. Please do not heckle the school board. We need to be able to hear each other. So it was a unanimous decision in June to adopt that change. It is not on our agenda tonight to reverse that adoption. Procedurally, Mr. Johnson, I'd have to turn it over to you. It hasn't, we don't have a formal recommendation from the administration to reverse the June vote. Can we just do this sua sponte?
Now, it is in essence changing the language, so we'll probably have to go through 2 readings. Because you're in essence by removing or changing the language of the handbook. If you want to go back to May of 2022, that handbook.
Do 2 readings tonight?
No.
Jeff, so I guess my question, and I think Claire has the same one.
Mhm.
This only is in the student handbook under the enrolling in school section.
The proposal for the
That was
revision
approved- that was
is
approved by
to
the school
move
board.
it.
The current
The
handbook.
current one is in the, you're right.
So if which we voted down the new changes, we go to the one we approved in June, which only applies to enrolling students.
Correct.
I'm comfortable with where that sits now.
Okay.
How's that read?
It's under the enrolling section, so for an enrolling student, gender, pronoun, name changes requests should be directed in the school's administration or counseling center. Such inquiries can be initiated by the student and or family.
And that, our recommendation is to move it from that section, because I don't think read that it is limited to students enrolling, because it talks about changing.
And one of the reasons we changed it was to make sure that the parents were involved. And if you go back to what you just read, it says student and or parent. So it could be just a student.
Correct.
The parent could be totally left out.
But by being an enrolling, to enroll, you have to have parental.
Mhm. And in addition, to make any changes to a student's record by FERPA standards, if it's an unemancipated, if it's a student under the age of 18, FERPA dictates that it's a parent that has to make changes to
Right.
records, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. Which would make sense because a parent would have to be with you in order to enroll a student within the district.
And my 2 concerns are the mental health and not putting this on our teachers, which the way, what we voted in June, I think.
Okay. So item 11.01 by unanimous vote has been tabled until the next academic school year, and we will move on with item number 12, which is business and operational services discussion items. Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley and Board of Trustees. Meeting and revisions to board policies. Mr. Ryan Snoddy, PHM's Neola Associate, met with PHM Board Policy Committee on June 16th to review the current update to our board policies. I have the privilege of serving on the Board Policy Committee along with Board Attorney Jeff Johnson, Board Policy Liaison Mr. Chris Riley, Ms. Lucia Ramey, and Mrs. Rachel Hugenboom. Following the committee's reviews, revisions have been processed in-house to get the policy to the pre-adoption format, which is what is being presented to the board this evening. There are 2 revised policies scheduled for a first reading this evening. These 2 policies are the first group to undergo revisions from this most recent update. And I'd ask Board Attorney, Mr. Jeff Johnson, to present the 2 policies. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Dr. Thacker, President Riley, members of the school board. As Dr. Thacker indicated, there are proposed revisions to 2 policies that are scheduled for a first reading this evening. The first is policy 5460, graduation requirements. The proposed revisions to this policy will bring PHM in compliance with recently enacted state laws. They include addition of 3 requirements to be included in the student's graduation plan that is developed during the 8th grade. These additional requirements for the graduation plan include One, the program of study for college and technology preparation curriculum must comply with Indiana Code 2030-10-2 in meeting the interests, aptitude, and post-secondary goals of the student. Number two, the graduation plan must ensure that upon satisfactory fulfillment of the plan, that the student will qualify to graduate, will have taken the minimum variety and number of courses necessary to gain admittance to an Indiana educational institution. And third additional requirement for the student's graduation plan is an indication of the assessments which the student intends to take during grades 10 through 12, such as SAT, ACT, advanced placement exams, college readiness exams, workforce readiness exams, and the Cambridge International Examination. Another revision to the graduation requirements adds that students beginning with the graduating class of 2023 must satisfy all three graduation pathway requirements established by the state in order to earn a standard Indiana high school diploma. These three graduation pathway requirements are: students must meet the credit requirements of the state provided by the Indiana Department of Education. They must learn and demonstrate employability skills through one of three different methods, which are defined by the Indiana Department of Education. And lastly, the students must demonstrate post-secondary ready competencies through one of several methods provided for by the Indiana Department of Education. Lastly, a student shall be awarded a certificate of course completion if they complete the minimum courses required for high school graduation, but that did not satisfy all three of the graduation pathway requirements. Second policy that is up for a first reading this evening is policy 8500, food service program. And the revisions to this policy give guidance to individuals who desire to file a complaint of discrimination against a school corporation. So that concludes the first readings this evening.
Board members, any questions or comments for Mr. Johnson? I'll just give board members a friendly reminder that as policy committee, we only advance those suggestions from Neola that are actually required by law, by legislative action. So these are the policies that have been advanced for the board's consideration. Board will take action on these two policies at the September 12th, 2022 board meeting. We'll move on to our next item, which is a business hearing item. Dr. Thacker.
Thank you, President Riley and Board of Trustees. Executive Director of Business Services, Mr. Jerry Hawkins, will introduce this next item. Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Dr. Thacker, President Riley, and members of the board. Tonight we are requesting the hearing for our budget, and at this time there are no changes to the budget presentation that we had at the last board meeting on the 8th. And so we present that to you and ask for the hearing to take place.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. I now open the public hearing on the 2023 budgets for the Education Fund, Operations Fund, and Debt Service Fund. This hearing also includes the bus replacement plan and capital projects plan. This is a public hearing, and anybody who wishes to address the board is invited to do so on this topic. We already have two individuals who have pre-registered to speak to the board on this topic. So let me read the disclaimer again. Anyone wishing to address the board on this topic is invited to do so under this item. A time limit of 3 minutes shall be enforced for persons wishing to speak to the board on this item. Board Attorney Jeff Johnson will keep time and will alert you as your time is expiring. It is requested that names and addresses be stated at the beginning of your comments. Individuals may speak only once during this section of the agenda. Personnel issues are absolutely not to be addressed during open sessions of the board. Concerns about individual employees of the district should be brought to the superintendent or his designee, and the board does not respond to questions or comments posed during this item. So first person who pre-registered is Mr. George Bashura.
Good evening, President Riley, Dr. Thacker, and members of the board. First, I want to commend Mr. Hawkins for pushing the issue of the rainy day fund, which he's been asking for the last couple of years to be funded. And it got reactions out of 2 board members, which is just tremendous. On the flip side, I have to say, Mr. Hawkins talked last month about having a money tree to go pick off of. He does have a money tree to pick off of, and that's the taxpayers of this district. Okay, it's in a form of a tax levy. We ask that this board not go and increase the tax levy on the taxpayers due to the current financial situations going on in our country. But 7-0, the board approved it. Okay, that's 7 roots that supports the money tree. That's a tough one. That's a tough nut to break right now. Mr. Turnwald, you asked a question 2 meetings ago about the budget and went with an answer. We do this every year. That's not how a school board runs. You have to ask the questions. You got to know what you're voting on and what you're answering to. You can't go with, we do this every year, because if we did that, the world would be chaos. Okay, Mr. Riley, this is going to be tough. In all the years that Mr. Hawkins has asked about the rainy day fund, never came up in conversation in the past about what can we do to fund it. This year you did. I need to know those reasons why you're all of a sudden interested in the rainy day fund that Mr. Hawkins brought up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bashura. Next up is Mr. Rutten.
Hello again. This spring I asked a question. This meeting a year ago, Penn-Harris-Madison approved a project plan for capital and building improvements, and it was just over $4 million. But the capital improvements plan that was ultimately driving the bond issuance this spring ballooned up to 17.4 million. So that's a pretty substantial difference, 4 million to 17.4 million. This year, it looks like the budget has been posted last month or last meeting. It looks like it's a little over 5 million is what the current plan is. But I think we all know that the capital improvements plan is going to increase. And it could increase up to a little more than 18 million. That would be the maximum levy threshold that we can go to. I guess what I would like to say is I would like Penn to release a more comprehensive capital improvement plan up front to better capture what it's going to be in the springtime. Also, I'm concerned at the sharp increase of the debt load that PHM has incurred over the last couple of years. And this is relative to spending on education. Education spending has slightly increased. The debt spending has increased pretty substantially. To go along with this, there's been steady increases in local property taxes. Like the individual before me, I would also encourage Penn to make an effort to try to hold property taxes flat for the next couple of years. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rutten. Pre-registration to speak on this topic was not required. So is anybody else in the audience looking to speak to the board on this agenda item? Hearing and seeing none, I now close the public hearing on the 2023 budgets for the Education Fund, Operations Fund, and Debt Service Fund, the Bus Replacement Fund, and the Capital Projects Plan. Thank you, Mr. Hawkins, and we'll now move on to the hearing of visitors. I know that we have a number of folks who are looking to speak to the board, both in person and virtually. So I'll call on people who are here in the boardroom, then I'll call on anyone who's in our overflow room, followed finally by anybody who is watching with us via our live YouTube feed. Let me read this once again to make sure everybody understands. Anyone wishing to address the board on general topics is invited to do so under this item, the hearing of visitors, without registering. A time limit of 3 minutes shall be enforced for persons wishing to speak during the hearing of visitors. Board Attorney Jeff Johnson will keep time and will alert you as your time is expiring. Please, out of courtesy for everybody else, please stick to your 3 minutes. It is requested that names and addresses be stated at the beginning of such comments. Individuals may speak only once during the section of the agenda. Personnel issues are absolutely not to be addressed during open sessions of the board. Concerns about individual employees of the district should be brought to the superintendent or his designee. The board does not respond to questions or comments posed during the hearing of visitors. Mr. Bashira is the first person who registered. So, Mr. Bashira, welcome.
Good evening again, President Riley, Dr. Thacker, members of the board. There are some unfinished business things that need to be discussed. One, it's about the minutes. There has been no dates into the minutes as to when data is going to be released for the high school students' books. Being that parents need to adjust their incomes and may have to figure out budgets to pay for this, we have to figure out a time frame as to when this is going to happen so parents can take steps. Parents, please make sure you check your students' schedules. We were double booked last year upon a clerical error. Thankfully, Mr. Gallagher called me after the meeting that I had discussed about what the different codes were used on the billing section. We did get refunded, but it's so important. If they missed mine for $35, you think about how many students are in this district and who could have been double billed for classes and books that they didn't pay for. Another interesting bit of information is what goes into the Board of School Trustees meeting minutes. On July 25th, I addressed the Board of School Trustees on the I-Learn results over the past years. Mrs. Roach addresses the concern and asks for a report back from Dr. Thacker, and Dr. Thacker responds, I'm sorry, lost my point. This is what's written into the minutes. Trustee Roach made a request wanting a report of efforts that the district is making sure every student thrives at PHM. That's all that was said. This is another example of transparency that's not revealed to the public. We give an open date for when things are going to get, when parents are going to be responded back to. There needs to be better for clarification in the minutes. The meeting minutes are horrible and the process needs to be fixed. We should not have to go back and watch the YouTube videos to know what the actions are. We must hold you folks accountable. Why does everything have to be a mystery when it comes to the Board of School Trustees and the administration? Why do parents need to do so much work to look for accountability, transparency, leadership, and communication from the district? We need to get back to the basics of embracing parents with the process. We hear a lot about it, but we do not see the questions being answered. That is the frustrations the parents have in this district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bashura. Tracy Coda? Is Tracy no longer with us? Okay. We'll move on to anybody else here in the boardroom who'd like to address the board.
My name is Brent Curtis. I have two children in the PHM schools. I don't attend a lot of these meetings, but when I do, I'm impressed by a group of qualified, capable individuals who willingly accepted a thankless job and the grief that goes with it. I'm not here to add to your grief, but I do have some concerns. The impression I keep getting, with some exceptions, is a feeling of indifference. At least that's the appearance that you give. I don't see a lot of passion. Look at the parents in this room. That's passion. It appears that you are just going through the motions. Have a meeting, invite parents to speak, say thank you, move on to the next person, but do nothing. Check the box and repeat next month. What does that accomplish? It doesn't accomplish anything. There are no updates, no improvements, no progress. Nothing changes. If you're doing this because you want to make a difference, then ask yourself, what difference are you making? What impact are you really having? Look, no one is perfect. Parents aren't perfect. We don't always present our concerns in a way that's welcomed and well received. Passion can do that. But the board isn't perfect either. You don't respond to parents' concerns during the board meetings. When parents speak up, they're labeled as hecklers. So what evidence is there that these concerns are being heard and addressed? Parents know that not every single item will be fixed, changed, or implemented, but not every one should be ignored and dismissed either. You can and should report about those items that are being acted upon. I think most everyone would agree that changes need to occur. I propose that you provide on the meeting agenda time to review and discuss issues that are brought up by parents at the previous meetings. Don't hide from an opportunity for open discussion. Embrace it. Let parents know they are being heard. Parents would be grateful and everyone would benefit. Progress can only occur if we work with and for each other and make a commitment to be better together.
Thank you, Mr. Curtis. Appreciate your response. Who's next? Yes, ma'am. Come on up. In the back row. Welcome.
Hello, thank you. My name is Julie Clow. I have a daughter in the young adult program, address Creekside Drive in Granger. I just wanted to ask, what are the plans to solve the staffing shortages within our district? My daughter's at the new Discovery Young Adult program, which was shared and celebrated at the last board meeting. Since that meeting, the staff that was secured did not start, and we currently have a substitute leading the Discovery class of young adults in a temporary position. We learned of this change the afternoon of August 16th, the day before school. At the same time, we were told we didn't have a bus driver for 9 of our students. By 9:30 that night, we did have a bus driver, and we have the substitute teacher. What a roller coaster for our population of young adults that thrive in a consistent environment. And all of this happened in a program that had the entire summer to hire and plan to staff the new location at Discovery. And it was just disappointing. So I just wanted to share. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate your feedback. Dr. Thacker, I do agree. It's this past week, of course, being the beginning of the school year, there were some adjustments made, but by the next school board meeting, can we get a full report, a public report on staffing?
Yes, we will. Thank you.
Who's next? Mrs. Glassburn?
Thank you for allowing me to address all of you again tonight. Last meeting, I spoke about the academic decline of PHM that did not begin with COVID, but rather began in the 2014 school year with steep declines in 2015 and a steady decline since. If you all recall, all 15 of PHM schools were A-rated schools in 2012. Many are not even close to that rating today. However, there's a much bigger threat to our district. In 2015, Obama signed the Every Student Succeeds Act. One of the top tenets of this law requires that schools address equity and that greater advances be made in equity initiatives and equitable outcomes in place of merit-based education. These equity initiatives have since snowballed and further led PHM to adopt things like restorative practices in 2019. It's no secret that teachers are fleeing public education, more specifically our seasoned teachers. Teachers that entered this district pre-2012 can no longer work in this environment anymore. Talk to them, truly listen to them. They have seen what these equity initiatives have done to the behavior expectations of students. Here is what they are saying. Unruly students are sent to the office because they can't control themselves in the class and our teachers need support. But then these students are sent right back because the idea that everyone deserves an education, even at the expense of others, prevails. This happens over and over until the teachers just give up. They realize they're no longer supported. So now they spend half their class time addressing behavior instead of teaching and disrupting the learning of an entire class, and this is reflective in our test scores. I'm asking you to draft and adopt a no tolerance policy. Restorative justice has no place in PHM because your right to an education ends when you choose or threaten violence, bully, when you are disruptive, disrespectful, or you do not complete the coursework required to complete the grade or the class. Out of district students, and I have some, are here at will. Therefore, if they are in poor academic standing, they should be asked to leave. If they have even one suspension, they should be asked to leave. No tolerance. There's a lot that you do have control over, and I'm asking that you begin to do that now. Be the one school district that sets the bar, the one school system that sets the example. Be the PHM that PHM used to be when we were not afraid to do that. Every child deserves academic excellence. However, they must rise to the occasion. They must earn that title through their own merit with supporting curricula that seek to educate instead of rely on social justice and fairness. Because despite all of your efforts at equity, there will always be students who, in the words of Joshua Dickerson, ain't got a pencil. However, all students must learn how to ask for one. All students must learn what they need to do to get one. All students must learn who will teach them how to find one. And everyone must know the importance of what that pencil can do for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Glassburn. Who's next?
Hello again, Laura Zinsky. I'd like to point out, I noticed that Mr. Garrett's proposal was not put on the agenda, and that once again, you have ignored him. He's speaking for the parents. He asked you all to take a vote on what you believed about gender ideology, critical race theory. I know you said one more, but right now it's gone. A little irritated at the night. And I think it's incredibly disrespectful that you would treat Mr. Garrett this way over and over and over again. I don't know what you're so scared about. He's right. IDOE said does not belong in our schools, and I don't know why you can't agree with that. My guess is because you know it's here. We've given you the evidence. You've seen it, and you do not want to take action on it. Maybe because it's an election year. Maybe we're a little worried about losing some seats this year, and you should be, because you really haven't done anything to secure them. You've worked very hard at fostering more and more anger throughout the district and causing more problems when you could have just simply had a conversation with the concerned parents. You could have returned an email. You could have picked up the phone. I know some of you did answer. Mr. Turnwald's very good about answering any question that I posed to him, and I do appreciate that. Thank you. Because it shows to me, whether we agree on certain things or not, he's at least willing to open that line of communication. And you're not. You are willing to shut us up every meeting. You can say in the paper, you want to focus on your legitimate concerns. Well, you know what? I have legitimate concerns. When a teacher wants to know my child's sexual orientation and wants to put it in a paper for a grade, that's a legitimate concern. When a PHM employee is putting pornography in addition to PHM posts on Twitter, that is a legitimate concern. When a teacher surveys a student and puts it in their master thesis without permission and it involves sexual orientation and all the things for PPRI, that is a legitimate concern. And the fact that you choose to ignore it, and let's remember that thesis was having critical race theory in it, and I'm sure she's a wonderful teacher. I don't agree on the ideology, but it's there. It is absolutely here. And you don't want to know, you don't want to act like you know it. And I'm so very disappointed. I used to love this school district. My mother-in-law worked here. I brought my kids here from private school, and I am so disgusted with how it's turned out.
Thank you, Ms. Kuczynski. Anybody else? Okay, let's go to those who are participating via our YouTube feed. Yes, sir.
Yep. Salmon Lund, I just wanted to reiterate a little bit of that. You guys got less than 3 months. Us parents will speak once and once loudly in November. I can promise you that. We've seen it across the nation coming down. Okay? You are elected officials. You are here to represent us as parents. And that means all of us. I know it's hard, and I understand that trying to weigh the different views isn't easy. But you have laws, precedents, and many different things that go into play with all that. Okay? And your failure to represent us will be shown in November if you continue, especially if you continue to choose not to represent us as the people running the school district, okay? Because we can't all just run it together. That'd be madhouse. So we put people in our place to do it for us. So please listen When you have a parent that seems like they've got really good points, reach out to them. I don't have to reach out to you. You reach out to me. Your job is to represent me. If you've got a question about something I've put up here, please feel free to contact me. You've got my number. I put it down every time I'm here. Contact me, ask me questions, because a lot of these parents are doing the work that you guys should be doing with every one of these policies. Okay, when it comes down to them pulling up laws, past precedents, these are things you guys are hired to do. You ran and are elected to do it. So please, I'm begging you, please do it for us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay. Now we'll go to those who are participating virtually. And our first participant is Elizabeth Gates.
It says Brian Gates is trying to join, actually.
Okay. We'll stand by and wait for Mr. Gates. Mr. Gates, can you hear us okay?
Hi, yes, we can hear you.
Okay, well, thank you for staying patient with us and for joining us via the YouTube feed. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. My name is Elizabeth Gates. We live in Prairie Lane. I too, along with Julie Clow earlier, am a parent of a student in the young adult program. So from here on out, I'll call that YAP, YAP. I'm referencing the new location in Discovery Middle School, and I'd like to share with you the experience we've had so far. So I've done a rough outline. I'm going to try to quickly just read so you have an idea of some of the things going on. August 4th, we get an invite to the open house. Within that email, they have what the summer improvement were. They were flexible seating options, new appliances. This is for the special needs students, young adults, new countertops, work surface, kitchen updates, shower updates, updated simulation galleys, the laundry, bedroom, kitchen, office spaces. They also talk about a YAP meal program that was going to be put together where the students would buy food, go to the grocery store. It'd be all life experiences, grocery store. They'd come back to the class, make those meals, eat those meals together as a class, and help with social, etc. So that was all the things that they were talking about. You know, these are some of the goals that were in the program. Tuesday, August 11th, we meet the new teacher. The students come in and meet her. She hands them a schedule, a physical schedule of the 2 months of meals that they're going to be eating. Our kids are super psyched, super excited. Their life revolves around food, so you've got their attention at that point. They'll do anything for you. So next step in the process after the open house, I send the teacher a 5-page email, because when you have special needs children, that's what it takes to get them up and going. If you don't have things in place, consistency, etc., you will have problems from the get-go regarding behavior. Some of those problems for my daughter would take 6 months to a year to undo. So, you know, preventing negative behavior is always the key. Monday, August 15th, that teacher writes me back, plan in place, seeming great. Now to update you, day before school, 9:18 in the morning, teacher sends an email to everyone reiterating what the goals are for the program. 3:53, the same day before school, 16 hours before school starts, we get an email. The teacher has transferred to a different position within the PHM school system. So now these students have no permanent teacher that they just met a few days ago. Secondly, the meals program has been canceled due to they can't afford it in the budget, which is opposite of what they told us in the meeting 4 days before that. And they'll only be doing a meal on Friday. And third, there was a busing issue. So at this point, they still don't have a permanent bus, but.
Your 3 minutes have expired.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you. Ma'am, thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. We appreciate that feedback. Mr. Gates, you too are registered for 3 minutes. Would you like to use your 3 minutes?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Brian Gates, same address. To piggyback on what Elizabeth and Ms. Cho were saying, to be clear, Isabella is the fourth child that we've had go through the PHM system. I'll point out that the second half of PHM's mission statement is to prepare these kids to be responsible, healthy, and contributing citizens. And with our first three children, I can tell you it was mission accomplished. We have two kids who are already college grads, working outside the home, living their best lives. Our third child is now a sophomore in college. All that we are asking for Isabella is the same commitment to preparing her to be this responsible, healthy, contributing citizen. And she needs this program so very much. You will present it with these expectations created for us, that very enthusiasm Dr. Thacker was talking about at the beginning of this meeting, all those things that Elizabeth outlined. This teacher from Colorado committed to our kids with this vision of what it's going to be, and those galleys, the food plan, the independent living skills they were going to be getting, only to find out the day before school happened that none of those things were going to be possible. And in fact, but for some very good-hearted volunteers, we wouldn't even have a way for busing to get these kids to school. We don't just want to be here to complain. Elizabeth and I have struggled as to what we're really asking you to do about this. And the best we can come up with is we want your attention. We want your awareness of this because our kids do not adapt well. They need the consistency, the predictability, the clearly defined expectations for this program to be successful, for this mission to be accomplished with these kids. And we're just asking for whatever help we can get. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gates, very much. We appreciate you bringing this to our attention. You certainly have our attention. I don't know if you were able to hear the rest of the parent comments, but the issue about staffing did come up. We have asked for a report from the administration, and we expect the report will be delivered by the next school board meeting. So I just didn't know if you were able to hear all of that, but we appreciate your time and your attention bringing these matters to our attention. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hugenboom, anybody else who'd like to participate virtually?
No, there's nobody else.
Okay, we will move on to the next item on our agenda, which is board reports and requests. Board members, do you have anything to report or request?
Yes, I do. Continuing on my year-long quest to get the critical race theory discussion brought to the board, I'm asking one more time that you add it to the agenda for the next board meeting. And if you don't, then next time I will try to get a second, or maybe even if we get a second, it won't matter if no one will vote for it. But I do think this is a situation we should be discussing. I think we need to take a stand on it. I've talked to some teachers that don't agree. Some teachers are afraid it's going to put too much pressure on teachers. Well, I guess I look at it from the other perspective. I'm thinking if I'm a teacher and I'm told or given a lesson that I have to teach this racist stuff to my students, I can say, no, I don't have to, because we have a standard that says I don't have to do that. It gives them a back. It gives them a way out. You know, it gives them a standard that they can go by. We have no standard right now. You teach critical race theory, who says it's not a good thing? You know, except the Indiana Department of Education says it's not a good thing. But I think we need to take a stand on it. I mean, some people say, well, it's not being taught, so we don't need a rule, or we don't need a standard. Well, that's like saying, well, I'm in a classroom and I don't have to have a tardy policy because none of my students are tardy. You still have the policy just in case. I mean, it's best practices, I believe, as part of, the rules on the board, 4 or 5 rules. Everybody does this, that. So to continue to ignore this, I believe we're doing a disservice to our teachers. I believe we're just doing a disservice to our parents. And I certainly believe we're doing a disservice to our students. So as I said before, the resolution was prepared by our own attorney, Mr. Johnson, back in December. I gave you a copy of last week. I hope you got a chance to look at it. And I would just read through it and tell me one thing you don't agree with. Read that. And if there's one thing there you don't agree with, let's talk about it. But it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, it's a no-brainer. It's from the Indiana Department of Education. It's not from, like I said before, it's not from some
right-wing or left-wing crazy group. It's from our own Indiana Department of Education. All we have to do is look at it, and then if you don't agree with it, say it. Take a stand one way or the other. I don't agree with it, or I do agree with it, but let's institute it in our schools one way or the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Garrett.
I have a question for Dr. Linsky. Can we get an update on the community fitness center situation?
Thank you, Board Member Roach. We're still reviewing that. We plan to give you a report hopefully by the next board meeting as to where that sits and how that facility is being used. We wanted to wait until school started so that we get a full picture of how that's being used before school, during school, and then after school and evening.
I also want to follow up with a question about the aftercare situation. Do we still have students on the wait lists? And I'd like, do we still have students on the wait list?
We can give you some information right now.
Yes, I'd
Okay.
love that.
Dr. Sotokyle, could you share an update?
Yes, all,
Dr. Sotokyle, can you come up here so the people who are watching virtually can hear you?
sure, and Dr. Short chime in because I know that you two had the update as well. All students that were registered up till and including July have been assigned a site. After this time, we have, and I know there were questions in the past with regard to staffing. We were able to increase the staffing to accommodate at many sites. We still have a wait list, although fewer. Again, we're taking a look at the students that we have in place that can assist us. In addition, we have reached out to support staff at all schools and have given them the opportunity as well to provide us with the needed staffing at all sites.
So they can be hard to read because they are so long. But the Kingsman Nation, I noticed this past week, did not include a call out to our high schoolers. But I think this is a community-wide urgency. And I know there are a lot of parents that read the Kingsman Nation in addition, probably more parents that read the Kingsman Nation than students perhaps. But can we make sure that we get a all call out to our students at Penn as well as families and communities, that this is really important?
Certainly, we'll make sure that happens.
Thank you, Dr. Sotokyle. Thank you, Ms. Roach. Other requests and reports?
I just have something. I abstained from voting on action item 11.01, and I don't know if that got caught.
I did not call for an abstention on the
Sorry.
vote to table. Would you like for the minutes to be revised so that we show that the
Yeah.
motion to table was passed
I'm sorry.
by a vote of 6-0 with one abstention?
And I also just want to address some of the things that were brought up here tonight in regards to us not discussing things outside of this. We ask questions, we talk to one another regularly when we're asking questions for clarification if we miss, or if, like, as the vice president, I have to check in with President Riley regularly with questions. I did miss the meeting where the June meeting, and therefore there was a lot of clarification and questions revolving around that, as well as like more input that we all needed here tonight. And as far as like the passion goes, I have like this, the people that sit up here that I've gotten to work with, like that are here tonight, that have been here in the past that I've sat with, have so much passion for these teachers, this community, the kids. And obviously most of us are we're all parents. We have passion for our kids. We spend, especially like in the last few years, hours and hours of our week invested in this role. And if you've been here for any amount of time sitting in these meetings, you would know it's not out of the norm for me to cry, either from something that the teachers have shared that they've done in their classrooms with these kids, or accomplishments that a kid has made, or through a letter that we have read from a parent whose kid felt excited from a band accomplishment or a sports accomplishment. Each one of us has had many times where on a regular basis, a weekly basis. We are celebrating along with this community. We are crying along with this community with everything we've been through the last few years. And we do have passion, and it doesn't always translate when we're up here in our like suits and being business-like and trying to be professional in this role. But we do have a heart for this community. Everyone up here does. And it has, sitting in this seat has changed my life. And I'm really thankful to have worked with all of these people and all the people that are sitting up here now and all the people I've learned from in the past. And I just want you to know that we do care about this position, that we're serving because, I'm serving because I love this community. I love my children. I love your children. And I just don't want you to think that our business, like, the way we run these meetings is with a goal of being professional, and it does feel heartless sometimes, I am sure. And I apologize for when I have come off as heartless, because that is not how, there's a lot of passion on this board, and we've heard each other yell, we've seen each other cry, and we are trying to serve you. So I just want you to know that we care, and that each one of us, we are listening when it seems like we're like, your 3 minutes is up. We are listening. We're reading your letters, and we're thankful for them. And we're thankful for your research. We're thankful for all of that. So thank you for your input. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. I know everybody has a better place to be on Monday night. So thank you for taking the time to invest in our community. I appreciate every single person who's here every single time. So thank you. And even when you only come once. So thanks. Sorry.
Yeah, anything to apologize. You're very much appreciated too. Thank you for everything you just said, and I agree wholeheartedly. Any other board members' reports or requests?
On that note, I just want to follow up on there was some discussion in speakers last week or last meeting about social media policy and what that, and again, Angie, I think underestimated the time we put into that. That has been discussed as our group from all angles for a social media policy. You've got some collective bargaining in there, union. You've got laws that we're looking into. It's not as simple as just us wanting to write a policy and vote on, or asking administration to write a policy and vote on it. So we're doing our due diligence. We're all bringing our opinions and our fact checking and our research to the table. And it's being addressed as many topics to bring up. But it is a process.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. Anybody else? Well, I want to chime in and address the points that Mr. McCullough and Mrs. Gates made. I agree. Sometimes from the vantage point of the public, it looks as though maybe the decisions have already been sewn in the carpet, or that we don't care what you have to say, or that we're just here to nod our heads and say thank you as you address us and then walk away. Or as it was put, just check the box. And I want to assure you, as I look out and I look at many faces in this crowd, there are many faces in this crowd with whom I've spent a lot of time on the phone. Many emails that I've received to which I've responded. Now, we may not always have agreed, but I've always tried to be very respectful to you and to treat you with dignity. And in turn, I appreciated it when you did the same to me. Tonight, I think, is a great example of why maybe some misperceptions exist. I think you had 7 people who showed up tonight knowing exactly how they were going to vote on policy 11.01. And then we heard from you. And then we changed our mind. Maybe even for different reasons. Maybe even for competing reasons. But listening to you influenced our votes such that we decided not to go forward with adopting a policy that I could have sworn before tonight began would have been adopted. I do thank you for your feedback. I do appreciate your feedback. I may not always agree with you. You may not always agree with me, but I will treat you professionally with dignity and respect. And I just want you to know that you are listened to, that the things that you say do make a difference with the board and are taken into consideration. I think tonight's a great example of that. There being no further business before the board, we'll move on to announcements. Next regular meeting of the Penn-Harris-Madison Board of School Trustees will convene on Monday, September the 12th, 2022 at 7 p.m. at the Educational Services Center here on Bittersweet Road in Mishawaka. Do I have a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting?
I should move.
Second. Second? I'm sorry, who had the second?
I second.
Okay. All those in favor vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, vote nay. We're adjourned at 9:15.